guys, it's Kesara, and today we're going to be doing my February reading wrap-up. So I ended up reading 14 books in the month of February, which is pretty much on par with what I read in January. February ended up being a much more busy and stressful month for me. The average page count was only 315 pages. I read a lot of shorter books, with my shortest book being 82 pages and my longest book being 880 pages, which is an outlier. That was the only book that I read that was that long. I think I did have like a couple other like 400 page books, but most of the books I read were under 300 pages. The fact that there's an 880 page book in there and the page count is still that low of 315 just goes to show just how many short books I did end up reading. But overall, I did like most of the books that I read because my average star rating was 4.1 stars. So overall, I'm happy with what I read in the month of February, but I am hoping to get to some of my more ambitious goals in spring. I also did end up reading 4 physical books and 2 ebook and only 8 audiobooks. So I did read more physical book than I was expecting to, and again, on par with January. So before we get into the books that I read in February, I do want to do a quick check-in with my reading goals. So my main reading goals were my Read It or On Haul and then my series challenge. So I did end up reading 5 of the 6 Read It or On Haul books, and I started but didn't finish the 6th one. That 6th one was The Golden Key, and it will be rolling over into the spring season, which I kind of expected going into this, so it's not that big of a surprise. As for my series challenge, I did finish The Wall of Storms, which is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, which was the series that I ended up picking for my series challenge. I didn't end up finishing the series, but I'm happy with the progress that I made on it. And because I'm super into the series now, I have decided to continue on with the series and finish it before the end of the year. I think I'm happy with the progress that I've made with my series challenge, but also in winter, I did end up starting 2 new series that I didn't complete. So I have 2 fantasy series here. The first one is The Path of Lantistine, which I read the first book in the series, which is The Empire's Ghost by Isabelle Steiger. I haven't continued on with the rest of the series, so I'll have to add this to my series challenge. And then the other one is The Tamir Triad by Lynn Flewelling, which in January I read The Bone Doll's Twin, and I didn't end up continuing on with it in either January or February. So both of these are going to be added to my cup so that starting in summer, they could be 2 of the ones that I end up picking from this cup, just so that I can continue to stay on top of all of these series that I'm starting. There are a lot that I have slated to start in spring as well, so I just want to keep on top of them. But without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in February. So normally I talk about my books from lowest rated all the way up to highest rated, but before we get into that, I do want to take a second to talk about the An Ember in the Ashes series. So there's 4 books in the series. I read the first 2 books in the series, An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night, and I read about 70% of the way into the 3rd book in the series, Rebirth the Gates, but I ended up DNFing Rebirth the Gates and not even getting to the 4th book in the series, A Sky Beyond Storm. Because of that, I feel like I just don't have a good place in the ranking to put this series, because I do want to talk about the series as a whole together, but An Ember in the Ashes, the first book in the series, I absolutely loved. The very first section of this book got me so emotionally invested in these characters, and they have this particular quest that they're on starting in the very first book, which that particular quest ends towards the end of the 2nd book, and there are other things that open up, but I was never quite invested in the rest of the side quests or the rest of the story arcs, so I kind of lost interest in the series after that. But this very first book is probably one of the best YA books that I have ever read, and I loved it so much. I feel like the characters are so well written, you get to know them so well, you get to understand how they think. I feel like there's just so much possibilities in the world building that I ended up loving this first book so much. And the second book was quite good too. I ended up giving An Ember in the Ashes 4.75 stars, and then I read A Torch Against the Night, and A Torch Against the Night was quite good too. I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was kind of lowered stake than An Ember in the Ashes, so I didn't love it as much as the first one, but I still had hope for the rest of the series. So I ended up giving A Torch Against the Night 3.75 stars, but as I've already mentioned, I did end up DNFing Rebirth the Gates, and that's because I just lost complete interest in the story. It got to a point where there were reveals that were happening that were were set up in the first book. So I should have loved it because it was somewhat related to the storyline from the first book that I absolutely loved. But I found myself just thinking, I don't care about this. Why don't I care about this? So because of that, I just felt like it wasn't meant to be. Maybe at some point in the future, I'll come back and end up reading and loving these last 2 books in the series. But as of right now, it's not my intention to finish or continue on with the series. I'm happy to have An Ember in the Ashes since it is my favorite in the series and honestly one of my favorite YA books of all time, but I don't think I will be continuing on with the series as a whole. So for the 3-star books, I only have one, and that is The Empire's Ghost by Isabelle Steiger. If you watched my vlog for this, you'll know that when I finished this book, I was very torn as to what to end up rating it, between either a 3-star rating or a 5-star rating, because there's a certain way this book is told that could either be brilliant or not so good, but I decided to take my initial experience of this book more into account, so I ended up dropping it down to 3.5 stars. And the reason for that is because while I love this book, it is everything that I want in like a politically driven fantasy novel. It follows so many different characters in this world in which there is this emperor, I guess, that is trying to take over the continent. So there's a lot there that I want to like about that, but I never got super emotionally invested into the right characters. There are certain characters that you're supposed to like more than other characters, but I feel like in most novels, the author kind of steers you in one direction or another, and this one really doesn't. The author kind of just lets you do and understand and decide which characters you like, which characters you don't like, and I ended up liking a certain set of characters that were obviously not meant to be the main protagonists of the story. I mean, those are the characters that I found interesting, because there's a particular scene I'm thinking of that was supposed to be super heartbreaking, and I was just like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I'm not emotionally invested in these particular characters. But I will say one thing I think this novel did really well is all of the characters are very well defined, and they learn and they grow, and there's some interesting world building, especially towards the end when we get like the reveals and stuff, that I'm really excited for the rest of the series. I just think it was a little clunky getting into this one because there was very little direction by the author. I don't know if that's a bad thing though, because I feel like it could have been like actually a stylistic choice here, because when I got to the end and I got the reveals, I was just like, this is kind of amazing. I enjoyed this book so much, and like 3.5 stars is not a bad rating, and if this ends up being a favorite series of mine and one that I end up reading over and over again, I'll probably adjust that rating in the future anyway. But I did enjoy this quite a bit, and I am excited to move on to the other books in this series. And now I'm going to be moving on to my 4-star books. First, we have 2 books by Abby Jimenez. The first one is more of a short story, and it's called The Situationship, and it is just a really short like story about 2 characters from her Part of Your World series that are not like the main characters from that series meeting and getting into, as it said, a situationship. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was fun. It got me into a really good mood, so I really enjoyed being able to pick it up. The other one was The Fall Risk, and this one was quite fun as well. It is also super short. It's like, I think it took me just like a couple of hours to read, but in the last Part of Your World book, I think it was just for the summer, the main character's friend was a traveling nurse with her. It's about the friend basically getting into also kind of a situationship with like the, I guess, friend of the main love interest from Part of Your World, and I enjoyed it a lot. The reason why they call it The Fall Risk is because there's a risk of them falling in love, and this was another one, again, super short. Like, it makes me really excited for her next book, which is coming out very soon, and I'm so excited about it. But that's kind of the reasons why I picked these up. I wanted something in February. I realized I didn't put any romances on my TBR. I just wanted something quick and short and easy to read, and this was just a lot of fun, so I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. And next we have Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This is super short, but I feel like this is the type of T. Kingfisher book that I just absolutely love. It is following Toadling, who is like kind of like a princess, but she's like not. It's kind of like the idea of like the Princess and the Frog, but except she's the frog, but not really. And she has like a curse on her. So a prince comes to try and break the curse. She doesn't want it broken. I enjoyed this so much. It was just a fun spin on an old fairy tale idea, which I feel like a lot of her stories have that same sort of vibe. So I was just feeling like wanting something like short short and easy, and that will give me those vibes. So that's why I decided to pick this up, and I ended up enjoying it. So I gave this one 4 stars. Super short, so there's really not that much to it. And next, I did finish 5 books from the Discworld series. They were A Color of Magic, The Light Fantastic, Sorcery, Equal Rights, and Weird Sisters. So the first 3 that I mentioned are all in like the Wizards arc of the series, and then the last 2 are in the Witches arc of the series, which I liked both of them for different reasons. The first 3 are following the character of Rincewind, who is a failed wizard, which is just fun. Like, let's just put it that way. It's just so much fun. In the first 2 books, he is taking up as the escort or guide for this kind of naive tourist. The situations they get into is just so much fun. And then the tourist has this like luggage that is like semi-animate or semi, not autonomous. I mean, it is autonomous, but semi-sentient, I guess is the way to put it, which I found the luggage to be one of my favorite characters in the whole story. It was incredibly interesting. And then we have the Witches arc, which I think the first book in the Witches arc I really love. It's about a girl who is accidentally made a wizard, but she's being told that she can't be a wizard, she has to be a witch, but she has wizard powers, which I found incredibly interesting. I think particularly the politics that are involved in that book are ones that really resonated with me because, I mean, it's called Equal Rights, so obviously you know what that's about. And then the mentor in that book is called Granny, and I loved her. In the last book that I read, the Granny gets her own pals, and they have like their own coven. That was probably like my least favorite of the books, but I still loved all of these overall. I rated them all between 3.75, 4.25 stars, but out of these, my favorites were probably Equal Rights and then The Light Fantastic. And then the next one I have is the only sci-fi book that I read this month, and that's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. You can tell I was in a certain mood this month because all of the books that I read are short and light and just fun, and this is no exception. This one was so much fun. I was surprised at how much I liked this book, but I think the jokes in this book were incredibly interesting, and the world, like, it wasn't a world, like the universe of this book was so interesting. I loved the world building in this, and I think the way it portrays humanity as both completely insignificant, but also one of the most important things in the universe was incredibly, like, I don't know, poignant. I feel like I think about that portrayal a lot, so I am so happy to have read this. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I do want to read the rest of the books in the series. I think it just had a lot of great concepts and also had like a lot of humor to go with it that just made it a really enjoyable experience. So now we gotta move on to my 5-star books, and I actually did have 2 5-star books this month, and they're both fantastic. The first one I want to talk about is Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. I enjoyed this so much. I did do a full read along for this book, so I'll link that up in the cards if it's out yet. I'll be posting it not too long after this video, but this book was so much fun. I read it over the course of like a day and a half. It is following 2 characters, Sayana, who wants to become the first female high mage, also Tomo, who is a Quen, which basically means he's like a foreigner who has immigrated to this city because it was very dangerous where he lived. So he works as kind of like a janitor in like the high mage's office. Of course, they end up meeting at some point here. There's a lot of like thematic elements to the story that I found incredibly relatable and also moving at times, but at the same time, I love these characters so much. I think they were so well developed. I love the setting. I love the world building. The magic is incredibly interesting because they use these, you can kind of see it on the cover here. They're called spellographs, which are like typewriters that pull energy or matter from the other realm, and they can use it in their city to do things like power electricity and things like that. So I found this incredibly interesting, and I did love like the direction this story went. The only thing I would say is if you've read The Sword of Kaigen, this book, in my opinion, doesn't pack as much of an emotional punch as her previous book, but it was still fantastic, and in my opinion, still a 5-star book, so I ended up loving this so much, and I can't wait to see what else this author brings out because she's slowly becoming a new favorite of mine. And next we have The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, which the Dandelion Dynasty has now become a new priority for me because of this book. This book was so good. I don't even know what to say about this book. Honestly, so much happens. Like, I wish I had done a read along because I wasn't sure how much I was gonna like this book because the first book in the series I did only give 3.5 stars. Obviously, I gave this book 5 stars. So like, I didn't do a read along for it or anything like that. But this book almost put me into a book hangover because of just how intricate it is. It has a very interesting like story structure. I think Ken Liu is a master master of storytelling. I loved all of the main characters. It is kind of following like the children's story from the characters in the previous novel, but also not fully, like it's still following those characters as well. And there's just so much that happens in this book. I don't want to go too into it. It's the second book in a series, so I don't want to give too many spoilers anyway for the first book. This one is definitely worth it. There are tons of things that happen. And I think what worked for it so well is just the amount of detail that goes into each individual storyline. I loved it so much. I ended up absolutely loving these characters and being completely broken when like things happen to them. And then the ending of this book left it in a place where there's just really interesting political tensions. Like, I'm so excited for the next book, but I also know the next book is going to take a lot out of me, which is the only reason I haven't started it already. But this is a fantastic series, which I cannot wait to continue on with. So that's all I have for you. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments because I would love to hear from you. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. I post at least one video per week, so please consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.